Okay, hello everyone, welcome. I'm so happy to see many people here. First of all, I want to tell that this seminar will be live streaming right now on internet via our Facebook page. And I think via Ex-Muslims of North America too, I think. And later we will upload the video on our YouTube page, so you can watch it later too. Today is 31 October. I don't know, do you know which day is today? I didn't know before my good friend and historian Halvar Chön sent me a message and said, Cemal, it's fantastic that you will talk about can Islam be reformed on the day, Reformation Day. Yes, you are right. 502 years ago today, Martin Luther started Reformation of Christianity. With the 95 theses, he nailed it on the door of a church named Wittenberg, in Wittenberg, yes. It is a special thing because it was only a coincidence that we choose this day. I didn't know, I'm not good with the dates. But it's nothing to do with the moon god Allah. I'm sure of that. It's nothing about him. Today we have very special guest from United States of America. His name is Muhammad Syed, like you know, everyone know, I'm sure. And he's one of the bravest ex-Muslim who started Ex-Muslims of North America in 2013 with Sarah Haider. She's brave too, of course. And Muhammad Syed is a Pakistani-American ex-Muslim atheist writer, speaker, and political activist. He created the organization Ex-Muslims of North America with Sarah Haider in 2013, like I said. And he is the co-founder, executive director, and currently the president of EXMNA. Ex-Muslims of North America, an advocacy organization, an online community which aims to normalize religious dissent and to helping create local support communities for those who have left Islam. And they tries to normalize dissent by doing seminars, giving speeches, and creating awareness campaigns. They also create and engage in protests for imprisoned dissidents and murdered atheists. So they are doing very good job, and I'm so happy that they are here today. And Halvor, come no, I have to thank you, Halvor. Thank you for remind me the day. Thank you. Today, first, we will invite Muhammad Syed here, and he will have a speech. After that, we will sit here and have a conversation about can Islam be reformed? It's a very big question, because before we ask this question, we have to ask, what is Islam? Who is the authority in Islam? Will decide what can change or what cannot change. So there is a lot of things. So if somebody say to you, we have to reform Islam, you have to ask him a lot of questions before we can answer this question. And after conversation, you have time for asking questions. We have microphone and Christian will go around. But before that, I want to say just something, not about this seminar, but I feel that I have to. Science Ex-Muslims of Norway started in 2016. There is a lot of people making lobby against us in Norway. We know that. We hear that they black painting us. They say we are haters, but they don't say why. What we are saying or what we are doing, where is the proof? But they're making propaganda, and almost these people are so-called secular Muslims who not practicing Islam even. and leftist, so-called humanist, atheist, leftist, regressive leftist, doing that. And it is really hurting us, because in 2-3 years, we have to fight to prove that we are humanist. It is the reason we left Islam. And we love all Muslims. Our families are Muslims. My mother are Muslim. All my family are Muslim. I love them. So I'm even risking my life and speaking out to save them from dogmas, to make them free. This is humanism. And they say, we are not humanist. This is really crazy. And I had to just tell that. And if you hear from someone negative things about ex-Muslims, ask them, show us the proof. They have to show what we shared, what we said, and what we did. Without that, don't accept it. This is a lie. They just want the thing will go, or there will not be enlightenment in Islam. It will go slowly, so they can earn some things, maybe. I don't know. Okay. So also, last thing, I have to say that, like primary school, you know, when you are in primary school, you have to explain things naive. Like, okay, listen, my friends. Muslims are human beings. Okay? And I mean it. And Islam is an ID. Please don't let me repeat this again every time I'm talking about Islam or criticizing Islam. I know my mother is Homo sapiens. So please not accuse us to be hater or not humanist. We are humanist. If all ex-Muslim activists are humanist people, this is the reason they are activists. They are risking their lives, and they are fighting against dogma. They want to make free their families and fellow humankind. Okay, thank you very much. And now we are very happy to hear you, Muhammad. Please welcome.
Hello, everybody. What Jamal was saying was exactly what we've experienced. It's common everywhere. And I think it's common whenever you're trying to push for change. Whenever you push against an orthodoxy anywhere, the orthodoxy will always push back. It's not about what you're saying, it's about what they don't want you to say. So simply because we're saying something uncomfortable and we're being smeared does not indicate whether or not we're accurate or true or bad or bigoted. When Spinoza, who one can argue is the father of the Enlightenment, started off, there was an attempt to murder him. He was banished, he was ostracized. The same has happened in every single change movement everywhere around the world. That is expected, and we should expect that. What hurts us is when people that should be our allies, people that understand where we're coming from, people that are liberal, that are humanists, that believe in free speech, that believe in equality of everybody, are not willing to stand up with us. We're not advocating anything that is different than what has already happened in the past in most enlightened countries. Simply because the Muslim world is lagging behind does not mean that we should be abandoned. And preventing us from speak or attempting to homogenize the idea that all Muslims are, all people from our backgrounds are religious is going to end in disaster for everybody, particularly for the people that live in those countries. About myself, Muhammad Syed, as Jamal said, founded EXMNA North America. I grew up in Pakistan, similar to Janet. I was actually born in the US and moved back to Pakistan as a kid. And I got all my education over there, and Pakistan is a very religious country. Also, I tend to speak fast, so if I'm speaking too fast, let me know and I'll slow down. Sorry about that. It's a habit. So growing up in Pakistan as a religious country where church and state, mosque and state are one and the same, and every aspect is, religion dominates every aspect of your life. The idea that the religion is not true is something that does not even occur to you. It's pervasive, it takes up all the oxygen in the room, from our educational system to science to evolutionary biology. in our school when we were taught evolutionary biology, there's a paragraph of what some Western people think of what evolution is, and then there's a paragraph of what we know to be true is what the Quran said and what Adam and Eve, how they came about. So that was the state of education. And when you have that state of education, what sort of entrepreneurs and scientists is that culture going to produce? Leading them to that is inhumane, in my opinion. The reason I left faith, one of the biggest parts, was that I encountered the writings of Carl Sagan. He taught me about evolution. His books taught me about how to think critically. And I didn't leave the faith as a result of reading those books, but I became empowered where I could think critically, where I could challenge myself about any idea. I learned about how humanity itself advanced and understood the universe, how we were 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, how the Greeks began the process and how it advanced over time. And then when it came to a point where I was examining Islam, I had the tools to actually critically examine it. And the result of that was that I left. You'll hear this time and time again from ex-Muslims that they try to engage with their faith honestly. They want to become better Muslims. The same thing happened with me, that I wanted to be a better Muslim. So I started studying Islam. The end result often tends to be, yeah, I understand it now, it's wrong. I started EXMNA because ex-Muslims in North America, because for a lot of people, they don't ever encounter another ex-Muslim. It used to be, a few years ago at the very least, very hard to even know that there were other people out there. When I left, I think the only public ex-Muslim that I knew of was Ayan Hirsi Ali, who was demonized relentlessly. With EXMNA, what we tried to do was to create local communities in a variety of cities. We're in about 20, 25 cities in the US and Canada right now. And so people can meet each other. They don't feel alone. They feel empowered when they're going through any issues, family abuse. They have support. We've helped people run away from abusive situations. We've rescued people that were kidnapped and taken back to the Middle East. All of this was possible because we had a strong network of people that were willing to put in the legwork to help each other out, like communities tend to do. We've also created a documentary series, which you can view on our website, exmuslims.org, which documents the stories of a variety of ex-Muslims. And people leave the faith for a variety of reasons. Some people leave because of how horribly religion treats women. Some people leave because it's scientifically invalid. So we documented a variety of experiences. Some people's families were very liberal and accepting and loved them more than their religion. On the other hand, the opposite occurs as well, where people value their religion much more than their children and abandon their children or even threaten to kill their children. So bringing all of these people together and airing out their stories empowered them and empowered people around the world. We've heard stories from everywhere in the world where people saw what we're doing and want to emulate and have tried copying our model or have come out themselves to their families. One of the videos we did was about a Somali ex-Muslim who was abused by his family. He came out. Within a week, we heard from dozens of ex-Muslims around the world that came out publicly as a result of him coming out. So the work we're doing is incredibly powerful, and it's transformative much more than just locally where we're doing the work, but globally. Because the same phenomena that has changed the West, understanding reality, is changing the rest of the world as well. There's no reason to presume that the rise of atheism, the rise of reason in the West will be limited to the West. Recently, we also put out billboard ads in the US. This is the first time any ex-Muslim group has ever done that, being that public. And we're planning on pushing further. As Muslims encounter our message, they go through the same path that I went through, are these guys wrong? Why are they saying these things? Let me investigate. And that investigation inevitably leads to them becoming one of us. So about today, we're talking about can Islam be reformed or not. I'll start off by giving you guys some background. As secular individuals, I don't think most of us have any illusions to the truth claims about Islam. We all believe that it is false, that it was an ancient idea, it's from the 7th century, that reflects the ethos of that era. You can say the same about any other religion as well. Judaism is from 7th century BC, Christianity from around the 1st century. And all of them, these religions reflect the geography where they were formed, the ethos of that geography and that time period. Islam, for example, does not talk about UFOs. Scientology, which is a more modern religion, talks about UFOs because that was the era it was born in. Islam, in comparison, talks about conquest. Muhammad was a warlord. It talks about wars with other groups. It talks about conquest of infidels. It talks about slavery. It talks about the status of women, which is exactly what you would expect in the 7th century. It's not something unique to Arabia. You go anywhere in the world and you would see women as second-class citizens in the 7th century. And Islam reflects exactly that. It has mentions of black magic, of people being burned alive for eternity for disobeying this God. All of this would be fine in a historical context, but the problem is that people still believe this today. It's not merely a fairy tale. For a significant percentage of the human population, it's an accurate description of reality. And while this is true for many religions, in Islam it's a particularly severe problem, both because of the size of the population and the number of people that actually buy into this myth as reality. When we're talking about reform, we need to look at what Muslims actually believe. From a mainstream Muslim perspective, Islam is perfect. It is a word of God and has always been perfect. There's no room for how do you reform divine perfection? There's a verse from the Quran, this day I have perfected your religion for you, completed my favor upon you, and have chosen for you Islam as your religion. According to God himself, Islam is perfect. Ali, who is the nephew of Muhammad and a prominent early Muslim, said, he who innovates or gives protection to an innovator, there is a curse of Allah and of angels and the whole of humanity upon him. So changing things, reforming things is something that was looked down upon from the very beginning. I presume because they had seen what had happened in Christianity, the rifts that have happened, Unitarian, Trinitarian, and they were relatively close by to that area. So if you recognize some of the features that I talked about the 7th century as undesirable, and that people today believe that and cherish those beliefs, how do you move forward? How do you go about changing what is perfect without rejecting or altering any aspect of it? One path that people have taken is generally referred to as progressive Islam. These people, progressives, tend to acknowledge that there are problems in Islam. They'll acknowledge that women's rights are not what they should be. But since they're not interested in altering the text or changing the essence of it, the tack they take is that it's a misinterpretation. The texts are perfect. One of the common ones is that Muhammad's companions were men. The people that wrote these texts down were men. Of course, they have an incentive to preserve patriarchal norms and to subjugate women. The true Islam, from their perspective, couldn't be this way. God wouldn't make this sort of a religion. So they use that as justification to dismiss certain parts of Islam or reinterpret certain parts of Islam. Prominent feminist Leila Bakhtiar translated the Quran, and it was called the first feminist translation of the Quran. One of the prominent verses that I'm sure many people here have heard of, it's chapter 4, verse 34, which gives men the permission to beat their wives if they fear disobedience. Not if they're disobedience, not if they're violent, but if they fear disobedience. So when Leila Bakhtiar encountered this verse, she decided that she could not translate this verse, she could not continue in her project of translating the Quran, because she could not believe that God would sanction harming another human being except in war. So her translation was contingent upon her perspective of what God is. It took her 3 months to translate that one verse because she struggled with it so much. She went to many translations, many dictionaries. She read through Edward William Lane's Arabic English lexicon over 10 times before she understood what God actually meant. Another path that is gaining more popularity at the moment is the idea, it's more popular in the West, in the secular world, is a reformation of Islam. What exactly is Islamic reformation? How does this Islamic reform? And how is it different from progressive or progressive Islam? One of the primary distinctions that I would draw is that while with progressives, they try to retranslate, they try to contextualize the verses and the scripture, they try to provide Islamic justification for their modernity. With Reform Islam, they come at it from the other side. They start with humanistic values, secular values, and try to map them onto Islam, and where they don't fit, They reject those aspects of Islam. Essentially, these are Western values with a Muslim coat of paint. Secular humanism with a Muslim bent. They advocate for equality of the sexes, equality of different sexual orientations, of minorities, of different religions. They advocate for secularism, separation of mosque and state, for freedom of conscience, for freedom of speech. All of these things are lofty goals that I'm sure everybody in this room agrees with. But the issue is, can these reformers actually get us to where we want to be? Can they actually institute actual change? What tactics are they using to try to convince people? One of the tactics they use is, as I mentioned, ignoring certain parts of the faith itself. So for separation of mosque and state, Muhammad himself was a statesman. He ruled over his city-state of Medina and then later over most of Arabia. Islam has been political to begin with. They ignore this aspect entirely when talking about a secular separation of mosque and state. Another idea they talk about is that the scriptures themselves have no inherent meaning. It's just a book. People read meaning into that. Muslims do not derive their values from the book, but they read their values into the book, into Islam. As Majid Awaz might say, the text does not speak for itself. This is why interpretation is important. True Islam is what the reader interprets it to be. For those that don't know, Majid Awaz is a prominent reformist based in the UK. He runs the Quilliam Foundation. While I agree with the goals reformists aspire to, and I'm sure most everybody in this room agrees with their goals, I'm troubled with its viability and the influence that it has gained in the recent past. Considering we agree with their goals, why should I be troubled with what they're trying to achieve and how they're trying to achieve it? One of the issues is that reform is not about truth at all. And as Jamal said, we're humanists and we value the truth deeply. It's not about the truth of religion, of Islam. It's not about the truth of the natural world either. They're navigating both. They're attempting to use secular enlightenment values without abandoning the claims of revelation. This puts them in a difficult position, as secular humanism is not easily supported by religious texts of any form, particularly not of Islam. The result of the weakness of the intellectual case they're making is that reform tends to appeal to people that are outsiders, people that are in the West, that are of the West, and rarely appeals to people that are in the East that really and truly believe in Islam. It also appeals to a group of Western Muslims that do not have such a strong connection with the faith, who have one of their feet already out the door, who have adopted Western secular norms and are trying to square it with their religious identity. And while reform is not really about truth, Muslims tend to be. The vast majority of Muslims believe their text is literally true. That is the word of God, is the direct spoken word of God. It's not inspired like the Bible. It is the word. It describes the world as it is and as the world should be. The reform movement, by its very nature, acquiesces to religion and therefore has no answer to why Muslims should abandon their faith that they believe to be true in favor of Western values. This leads me to my second point, that reform appears pragmatic. It's easier to convince people of abandoning parts of their faith rather than abandoning it entirely, as ex-Muslims and atheists advocate. People think that it may be easier to get them to a secular universalist, humanist ideal while keeping them in the Islamic context. But there is no evidence for this. There is no reason to believe reforming Islam has a higher chance of success than simply pointing out that Islam is false. We cannot get 1.5, this is something a reformist would say, we cannot get 1.5 billion Muslims to apostatize. We are more likely to get them to abandon aspects of their faith without abandoning the entire ship. It sounds reasonable. But I argue that it's not. Reform is less intellectually sustainable than moderate Islam or even extremist Islam, and is certainly weaker than the case for abandoning Islam altogether. Also, our goal isn't simply to convince every Muslim to abandon the faith. If a small percentage of vocal people leave the faith and are speaking up about it, doubt percolates throughout society. And without surety about your faith, the violent aspects of it, the misogynistic aspects of it, become harder to justify. If you're only 90% sure about your faith, you're not willing to inflict horrors on other people simply because God told you to do so. You tend to need absolute certainty to do that. So ignoring or wildly reinterpreting the texts, as reformists often tend to do, is viewed with extreme hostility by Muslims. There's a verse in the Quran, so do you believe in part of the scripture and disbelieve in part? Then what is the recompense for those who do that among you except disgrace in the worldly life and on the day of resurrection? They will be sent back to the severest punishment. And Allah is not unaware of what you do. Their perspective is also antithetical to a religious outlook. If you're suggesting that there is no there within a religious scripture, which Muslims view as the bedrock of their civilization, the bedrock of their identity, of their worldview, how they understand the natural world, it's very easy for them to dismiss your claims entirely, because the claims that you're making aren't necessarily tied with Islam at all. You're not addressing what they actually believe. Atheists often miss this point since they don't recognize that the version of reform that is advocated is not an Islam that is recognizable to Muslims at all. For those that actually believe that there are truth claims to be made, that Islam actually makes these claims and makes them persuasively, it's much easier to convince them of the errors within Islam than to convince them to abandon parts of it based on some notions of secular liberalism. For example, evolution is a very powerful way of convincing people that the Adam and Eve story is wrong. And if the Quran got that wrong, what else did it get wrong? Reform itself tends to be a consequence of religion losing ground. Reformists that are talking about reforming Islam are profiting about the success of secularism against religion in the West. They're profiting from what we've already achieved over here. They want the benefits of a modern society, of a liberal society, without letting go of the superstitions of Islam. These reform Muslims exist because of the strength of liberalism, of secularism in the West. So let's assume for a second that reform is actually possible. If it were possible, is it a goal that we should actually look to achieve? Is it something worth pursuing? The obvious answer would be yes. It makes sense. Reformists espouse liberal values, Enlightenment values. They stand for freedom of speech. Of course, we support all of this. But that's not all they stand for. They stand for the continuation of a falsehood. They stand for continuation of revelation. They continue the tradition of unreason which has damaged the Muslim world for centuries upon centuries. Is it ethical for us to advocate for something we don't believe in? Reformists are asking us, roughly 3/4 of the world that are not Muslim, to lie. To be comfortable with the fact that we advocate for something we do not believe in, for a people that would be better off without superstition. By prolonging the hold of religion, reformists are prolonging the misery that these people are living in. Going back to what Jamal was mentioning about the Reformation, how many people believe it would be better if Europe was more superstitious today, where it was closer to the 15th and 16th century in superstition? Abandoning those ideas that are false has tremendously benefited us all over the world. There's no reason to presume the Muslim world can't benefit from those same advancements. And they're not amenable to the same logical arguments that propelled us forward. Beyond that, advocating for untrue things is dangerous. Believing things that are not true for political convenience is dangerous. We see that in the political climate today everywhere. Should we be setting aside our most powerful weapon, the truth, for political convenience, which is what they're asking us to do? One of the most potent questions you can ask a Muslim is to try to disprove their own faith. As a Muslim, I took that as a challenge. My faith is perfect. No matter what challenge you throw at it, it will be proven right because it is true. And that is the conviction most true believers have. So if you ask them to try to disprove their religion, and they actually spent time doing it honestly, there's a high probability that either they will suffer from massive doubt or they will live entirely like us. When people understand that the core claims of the faith are false, that Islamic history is not what we were taught. Most of Islam, the first 2 centuries of Islam are written from an Islamic perspective that are ahistorical. That the claims made about science are actually false. They reflect 7th century ideas, Greek ideas, geocentrism for one. When they become aware of this, they tend to become apostates. The Western conception that we live in right now of Islam as an identity, as a group identity that must be preserved, is false. I'm from Pakistan. Jamal is from Turkey. Being a Muslim or not being a Muslim does not change that. The same is true for Muslims all over the world. Simply because of abandoning their faith, they would no longer not be Egyptian. I can abandon my superstition the same as everybody else can. We can find an identity that precedes Islam and will continue on after Islam is gone. There may be a small minority, often in the West, that clings to Islam as an identity, as a minority group, but that is very rare, and that comes across from a position where it does not directly affect them. It's a position of privilege. So we started EXMNA about 6 years ago. Jamal started ex-Muslim Norway 3 years ago. In that limited period of time, ex-Muslim visibility has skyrocketed. Nobody had heard of ex-Muslims a few years ago. Now, not only are we everywhere, governments are actively fighting against us in the Muslim world. In the West, seminars are being arranged by mosques all over the US and I'm sure over here as well. Conferences are being arranged to try to dismiss our claims, to argue against us, to teach parents how to argue when their children talk about atheism. There was a seminar last week in Vancouver that one of our members attended to get a lay of the land. And one of the things that the imam talked about was, if your child is exhibiting signs of atheism, take them back home. And that is being advocated in the West. But the fact of the matter is that in a few short years, we have been so successful that they're having to retaliate in a massive way to try to stem the tide. What other evidence do we actually have of this turn happening? A Pew survey came out 2 years ago in the US, which said that 1 in 4 of those raised Muslim have left the faith, 23% in the US. Similar surveys have come out across the world which shows varying degrees of success. In Tunisia, a BBC survey came out this year that said 18% of Tunisians have left the faith. And this is just the beginning. So who do we want to convince when we're talking about this? Do we want to convince the people that are already convinced about liberal values, that are convinced about secularism, that are convinced about women's rights, and merely adopt the label of Muslim? Or do we want to convince the people that actually believe in Islam deeply and are willing to do whatever their God commands? People that are willing to be violent, people that believe women are second-class citizens because God told them women are second-class citizens, people that believe in nonsense as opposed to science. If we're trying to convince those people, they tend to be motivated by ideology. I was one of those people. They're also the sort of people that shift society forward. They influence people around them because they truly believe they want to convince other people of what they believe. Again, I'm another example. Before and after leaving, and from what I've spoken with Jamal, his story is very similar. We're influencers that are influencing people now as atheists, and we try to do that before as Muslims as well. When we believe in something, we try to convince other people about the validity and the benefits of those things. These are the people that we need to convince to leave Islam, become atheists, and convince others around them. And this is something that we see every day. Within the communities we run, we see people join, feel empowered by encountering other ex-Muslims, and then speak to their family members, and one after the other, brother or sister, start leaving. We've seen it across ethnicities, across cities. It's happening. And it's happening to the point that, as I mentioned, Muslims are noticing. So where are we failing? On the one hand, we're failing because we're not standing firm on our secular values, on our liberal values, on free speech. For the past 30 years, we've been in retreat. Whenever there's an attack, whenever there's an attempt to silence, the liberal world has retreated from it. From Salman Rushdie to the Danish cartoons to Charlie Hebdo. We're also failing because we're not trying to evangelize. If we believe in something to be true and to be beneficial to others, why aren't we convincing them of it? Islam is false. Science gives us a better way of understanding the world. Secular values are better because religious or irreligious, we can live together. We understand that. We have a history of why this happened. We have the bloody history after the Reformation of hundreds of years that led us to this phase, and something we want to avoid in the Muslim world. We don't want to subject them to the same terrors that Europe went through. Isn't it better to convince them now and avoid all of that instead of going through century after century of struggle? Thank you very much.
And Janet too. I have forgot to say that me and Janet will be on the panel too. I don't remember that. I mentioned to Janet. Okay. It was great speech. I agree with you. And you know, I think all three of us, actually, we didn't talk before this seminar. I didn't ask Muhammad, what do you think? Can Islam be reformed? Can you believe me? I didn't ask him. I just asked him one time, I want to make a seminar about can Islam be reformed? Do you want to come? He'll just laugh it. This is it. He said, yes, he can come and he'll just laugh. And I understand what he's thinking, because the same I'm thinking, and almost every ex-Muslims are thinking, because of, you know, we know what is Islam. I think sometimes Western people in the West and the secular Muslims maybe, or Muslim reform movement people don't know what is Islam. You know, do you know how dangerous to change only one word, to take out one word from Quran in Arabic? It is very dangerous. No one dare to do that. You know, maybe you have heard that the miracle of 19. One Muslim man, Rashad Khalifa, from Egypt, I think in 60 or 70 years ago, he came with the miracle of the Quran, that everything's pointing to the 19. And we have one verse in the Quran and says, don't you see the 19? Not explaining nothing. And this guy come with the one miracle that this is the proof, the 19 is proof that Quran is the perfect and God's word and cannot be changed. But the same guy take it out only one verse. Some words from the Quran, because if he meant that these words, if they are still inside the Quran, then is number 19 is not correct. This have to come later inside the Quran. Do you know what happened to him? He have been killed in the United States by Muslims, by fatwa. So I believe that, you know, and also like you mentioned it, that Quran is direct words of the creator of universe. Who are you to change it? Muslims believe like this. Even the moderate Muslim, if somebody practicing Muslim or not practicing Muslim, but if they identify themselves as Muslim, like they believe in Allah, they are agree that Quran is the direct word of Allah and cannot be changed. So there is reform is gone. We know that we cannot change the Quran. But you mentioned it, we have already first feminist Quran interpretation, not the Arabic changing. Quran is there, still the same, but they interpret in their way. We have a peaceful Quran of Rashad Khalifa, the 19 guy, and we have Ahmadiyya movement or they don't accepting many hadiths and Sirah, for example. And we have Muhammad Iqbal, for example, in this way. And we have...
Baha'i. The Baha'i in Iran.
Yeah, Baha'i in Iran. And we have even the one mosque in Germany right now for women, imam, and for homosexuals. No Muslim is believing them. And all these people is get persecution from the Muslim world, like Ahmadiyya people.
To give an example of Ahmadi in Pakistan, so he was a reformer in India before Pakistan and India separated. A good chunk of Ahmadis live in Pakistan right now. And in Pakistan, they passed a law, not just passed a law, amended the constitution to say that these guys are not Muslim. They're not allowed to call themselves Muslim. Their mosques cannot be called mosques, and that their graves must be defaced if they say that they're Muslim.
And they are not allowed to visit Mecca even.
Yeah.
So they are not considering as Muslims, by Muslims, not by ex-Muslims. I mean that, the nearest you can find Reformed Islam is the Ahmadiyya Muslims, maybe. But they are still believing the same things, but they are just rejecting some thing in the theology, but they believing totally the same Quran, but interpreting a little differently.
They tend to reject the violent aspects, but keep most of the rest. So the superstitions exist, the misogyny exists. They're not violent.
Yeah, and before Janet will say something, I'm sure, but I just want to ask you, there is an Muslim reform movement in United States. They started 3 years ago, and they nailed 40 theses to the door of the one Saudi mosque. Is that happening? What's happened after that? Because I didn't follow.
Nothing really happened.
Did they manage to reform something?
As far as I know, they didn't manage anything beyond getting some media attention. The people that were involved are reformists. They're doing their independent work. But as a movement, it didn't gain traction.
Because I'm sure that they are good people, Reza and the other people there. I respect them. But I feel that, we are wasting our time. Like you said, if we assume that we have lie, we lie about Islam. We say that kill all unbelievers, slay the unbeliever, meaning is not actually that. This means give the rose to them. And we convincing the Muslims. Let us assume. Sure. Don't you think that this is a betrayal of the humankind? That Islam is a lie from the beginning, and you have to lie about the lie to some people because you think these people are very poor people. They have to have their Quran.
So beyond the fact that it's very condescending, that you presume that they can reach the same level of enlightenment you do, how frequently does lie piled upon lie work out well in the end?
Janet, do you think Islam can reform it or not?
What's mean that? Just going to say this, that Jamal told me again before this seminar today that you have to start talking on your own in the seminar. Why do you just sit there still? People are going to think I don't want you to talk. And I told him, you should not tell me to start interrupting you. Ask my boyfriend. That's not a good idea. So I'll wait until I get the word, and that's fine. If you had kept going for another moment there, I think I would have gotten a sunburn. It got really bright there. So thank you so much. It was very nice to hear it put the way you put it there. I think I should just focus on the fact that why are people even considering the reform? The lie about the reform is that they want to go home to their parents. They want to go home and hug them and celebrate with them, whatever they're celebrating, Christmas or whatever. And parents don't want to see you if you tell them that you don't believe anymore. It's much easier to lie to your parents about trying to make Islam more modern or move along with the evolution of the world, instead of telling them the truth that you don't believe anymore and start a debate with them. Mostly that is a very tough thing to do. I met my parents in 2002 for a few days. It was terrible. It wasn't very nice. I remember my parents were really upset that I was drinking beer with my friends and that I had smokes now and then, because Pakistani girls are not supposed to smoke. But I didn't tell them that I was eating pork. I couldn't do that to them. I didn't want to stab that in their hearts. So I tried to save their feelings, although I have hurt them more than I could. I have tremendously hurt their feelings, but I still couldn't tell them that I too eat pork. The trouble with reforming Islam is that we have been lacking resource like we have now, like internet, like the connection that we are making. We couldn't have done this before. There is no point in history that we could have connected the way that we are doing right now. I mean, I read all articles I can find. Sometimes I even fight with people online, but I will always pick something from them that I take with me, and we'll keep getting better and evolving. But it's still the toughest part here right now, I would say, is the communism that is on the rise. It's the Stalinism, like we see in Sweden, rising up. The Western world has become more, they're walking in a way of dictatorship, taking advantage of those who want to make Islam, the pure Islam, the Quranic Islam, strong again for their own benefit. And they are the ones I think are fighting us the most.
So one of the things that you talked about in the beginning about not coming out to parents, imagine the gay rights movement from the 1960s onwards. Nobody ever came out to anybody. Everybody was in the closet. What success would they have had? Yeah. Simply because it's uncomfortable, simply because there are consequences, does not mean that we do not take the correct action. And by being open about who we are, we force people to make the decision about whether they love us or they love their gods more. And most Muslims are people just like you and me, and they love their children, they love their family members, and they will make the right choice far more often than we give them credit for. And we see this quite a bit. One of the funnier stories was there's a Somali guy who's left Islam as part of our one of our communities. He came home, he was drunk, his parents noticed, it turned into a big issue. He was kicked out of the house. The next morning, his dad confronted him and said, "Why did you tell your mother that you're an atheist?" When they fought, he said he's an atheist. It doesn't matter to me whether I drink or not. That why did you tell your mother? I'm an atheist. I never told her. And he did not know this. So imagine if the father had been honest from the get-go, how different life would have been for that kid growing up.
That too. I think it's about the numbers, how many we are, to create the environment of security. So you can dare to tell your parents and your communities that you don't believe anymore, or if you are having doubts, because there is a safe place to fall back. There are people who are going to understand you. There are people who are going to listen and discuss these things with you. You're not feeling... you're not like abandoned.
So that's one of the things why what EXMNA in Norway are doing, what we're doing is very important, because we're building up these communities where people are no longer alone. They have people around them. When they are in trouble, 2 a.m. in the morning, their parents found out, they get into trouble, there's an attack on them. They have people they can call that they actually trust that will have their back. And just knowing that you're not alone, knowing that if something goes wrong, they have these 10 numbers that I have, that I've met, that I'm close friends with, that will be there for me, changes your outlook on reality, on your ability to change the world dramatically.
I think it's the same in Norway too. We have, I think, all ex-Muslims have the same situation right now. Although we are many right now, many organizations from many European countries, and many ex-Muslims in the Middle East with the fake ID on the social media campaigning. But the problem is, even in the West, in Norway, we have people who are board members, ex-Muslims, from 70 years old to the 20 years old age they have. Many of them not dare to stand up in public. And one of them said just we have to remove his name from Brønnøysund register, like state registering, because of he get threats. We are living in this situation. I believe, when we are talking about reform, only reform mean in Islam is, for me, apostasy. and we don't need to be politically correct because of, and we are not. And I mean is, of course, it's a good thing to try to reform and try to do making similarity with the Christianity and Islam and trying.
The issue is that Islam and Christianity are very different religions to begin with. So presuming that what worked with Christianity will work with Islam is not true. And the other part of it that is often neglected that I briefly touched on, as reforming Christianity involved hundreds of years of bloodshed that depopulated Europe. Do we really want to wish that on anybody in the world for any reason?
And they hadn't internet even. They did. Somebody says that when Christianity became 1,400 years, around this age, then started some good changing started. So maybe this time now Islam, when the Islam is 1,400 years. But it's not the same. They hadn't internet, they hadn't social media, they hadn't Wikipedia, and they did that.
So they had the printing press. So the printing press is why it all happened.
Yeah.
Martin Luther's thesis went around the world. It changed the world. What happened in the Muslim world was the printing press was banned. So this, not just by Ottoman, by Persians, by Mughals in India, it was banned. It was banned everywhere. And for hundreds of years. So imagine...
Why? Because of Islam. We have to say the truth.
They were worried about the Quran being misprinted, and they thought it would displease God, so it was banned across the board. But the internet has provided the same tools that the West had through the printing press for what we're talking about, the ideas we have to be disseminated globally. And they are changing the shape of the world today.
And when we announced that can Islam be reformed, we will have a seminar. Maybe all of you or many of you have had a big expectation. What we will hear today. How maybe there is a solution. But trust me, my friends, Islam can't be reformed in the same way like Christianity. If somebody can do that, be my guest.
The issue is, as I was mentioning, Muslims take the literal, maybe literal isn't the right word, but the text very, very seriously, and they believe it is the spoken word of God, as the direct word of God. So any flaw in that is earth-shattering. When you see that God was wrong about Adam and Eve, when you see God was wrong about astronomy, the Earth's place in the universe, everything else shatters immediately because you view it in such high esteem. I think one of the issues that people have in Christianity, the Bible isn't held to that rigorous of a standard. So it's hard to relate how dearly and how perfectly the Quran is viewed in the Muslim world.
Mm. So it's also that the fundamentals of Islam, they are violent. And even though people say that they want to translate it differently, reinterrupt it to make it more modern or make it sound like it was always right, for a time, if you want to, kill the infidel can mean no, just kill their doubts, convince them. And then a few years pass and then kill means kill again. Because it's written.
Mm. So what happens is revivalist movements pop up that pull it back. So there have been attempts throughout Islamic history where people have become a little more liberal. They've pulled away a little bit. But within a generation or two, it's pulled back because these guys were heretics because they weren't adopting the true Islam. And since scriptures are so central, it's very easy to point out what it should be.
I believe there is three alternatives. If we believe that reforming Islam meaning is changing scriptures, like I said, it is impossible according to Islam, and I don't think any Muslim will accept that. And there is no authority can decide. Yes, this is right. You can take out. Yes, this you cannot.
The authority is the Quran itself. The scriptures themselves are central. Yes. There's not a pope. The central texts are what define everything.
Yeah, and this is the first thing. Cannot be. The second thing, I believe that if reforming Islam mean is the go back to the root, the source of authentic Islam. Go to Muhammad. You have to do like Christian people say. They go back to the root, to Jesus, what he said, the core of Jesus, or something like this. They say, like love everyone or something like this. Then, if you do this in Islam, you find ISIS, because the root of Islam is ISIS. Name me one thing that ISIS did, but not the Muhammad.
So just to contextualize that again, Islam was born in the 7th century. In the 7th century, these sort of things were normal. If you look at Norway in the 7th century, I'm willing to bet they behaved the same way. The problem is that for Muslims, they idolize that period without thinking it through what that represents. Many Muslims are very, very peaceful. My mom, his mom are those people. But unless they're actually confronted what this actually means, many of them don't know, for example, that sex slavery is in the Quran. Muhammad himself had sex slaves. Most women would recoil at that, but it's not brought to the fore. They're not taught about it. So if we have honest conversations, a good chunk of these Muslims will leave Islam.
And third thing, I believe, my favorite one, if reform mean is to telling the truth, there we can win. What does that mean? You know, in Islam, from the beginning of Islam, there have been forbidden to criticize Islam. Muhammad killed all opponents. Even the 80 years old woman who criticized Muhammad, killed by splitting to two by two camels, I think. And later, all movements like Mutazilis, and later today many so-called moderate Muslim calls that like we had many Muslim thinkers and philosophers they are very proud of. They were ex-Muslims. They have been killed or imprisoned or persecuted. So Islam not allowing, even today, blasphemy and apostasy in Islam forbidden. In 13 countries, we have T-shirts there. By the way, you can buy it if you want. There is writing that 13 countries, there can be death penalty for blasphemy. So what you have to do, the West, who dreaming that Islam will be reformed one day, you only have to help us, allowing us and supporting us to criticize Islam and telling the truth to the Muslims so they can see the truth.
I would say it's even more basic than that. It's treat everybody equally.
Yeah.
If you treat everybody equally, you criticize their bad ideas equally, you provide the same human dignity to everybody equally, the end result will be people will become the same because those ideas are convincing everybody.
And right now, I believe that fastest growing religion, if you call it religion, is apostasy. And this
At
is
least
really,
in the Muslim world.
this is really true. So all we need to do that we stop attacking us, especially you Western people, please. Okay, we are with you and we are with the Muslims. We're just thinking the good thing. This is the reform can happen. Because when I read it, even Muhammad Syed, in one article, he explaining why he left Islam and how it happened. It's amazing. It's the same. Every ex-Muslim, when I meet with them, I ask them, why you left Islam? I get all the time the same answer. I check it. I read it in my language, Quran, Hadith, and Sirat. And then I saw, the conservative interpretation is real Islam. The moderate interpretation is not. So we have to stop telling lie to people. We have to tell the truth. I believe this.
So one thing, sorry.
No, I wasn't.
To add to that is when you engage with the texts, you can become an atheist because you see the flaws in it, or you can become an ultra-conservative. You see the flaws in it and you embrace the flaws in it. That is why you're seeing this divergence that is happening. Often it's talked about how literacy is a positive thing and it empowers people. It does. But the consequence of that is they can engage directly with the text. They can leave Islam or they can double down on Islam.
And I have one question, Mohammed. When I say sometimes that the majority of, I have no data, of course, but majority of Muslim people, now I'm talking about Muslim people, my mother and everyone, okay? Muslim people are ignorant about scriptures. What do you think about that? Because, Western people looking the Muslims, like Turkey, Egypt, Tunisia, and the other Muslim people, they are nice people, sure, they are nice, and then they think maybe they have a nicer version of Islam, or they just don't practice Islam. What do you think?
So ultimately, if you read about sex slavery, if you read about Muhammad's career as a warlord, if you read about all the unreasonable things, one of the most unreasonable is that Muhammad flew on a horse to space to meet God with a stopover in Jerusalem. Chances are you will either walk away, but if you haven't walked away, you probably don't know about that or haven't thought about that. So cognitive dissonance plays into it a lot. You may read it, you may not process it. This happened to me. I knew about sex slavery. I was still a Muslim. My perception was that I am a mere human. This can't be right because God is right. God is good. So I'm just misunderstanding it. I'm not going to engage with this. And that lasted for a long time, over a decade, with Muhammad's flying space horse. I grew up in Pakistan, and in Sindh, I think, Janet, you're from the same part of the country. There's a holiday for kids, like up to high school, for that day. And you're supposed to pray all night to celebrate that. And I did that as a child. And it never occurred to me that I'm celebrating and spending my entire night praying because of a space horse.
But okay, I will not generalize. Now I'll go back and take my words. In my family, not all Muslims, in my family, whole family, around maybe 1,000 people, I don't know any one of them have read it Quran in Turkish or Kurdish. Everyone can read the Quran in Arabic without understanding. This is the reality of Islam. So we need to give information out, and we are doing ex-Muslims movement. What are we doing? That we are doing is we showing them the truth. We are sharing hadith, the saying and doing things of the Muhammad. Like some days ago, I shared one video clip from Arabic TV. There a cleric says that you can get married with 1 day or 1 day old child even. And the spokesman say, what do you mean? That what is the age? 9, 10? No. You can be even married with the 1 year old baby. He say, then cleric say, but this is not I'm saying. This is what Islamic Sharia law saying. And then I saw the comments. You can see these all comments in our Facebook page. One guy come because I shared this and I write there. I know now millions of Muslim people, when they watch this video, they will get shocked. They will deny that this is true because they are nicer than Islam, because they have better morality than Islam. And then I get attacked by one Hindu guy. He said, this is ex-Muslims. They defending Muslims every time. This is so crazy.
That's the problem. So we're in a situation where everybody hates us. You have the political left that doesn't want to talk about the problems within Islam, and we talk about those problems, so we're anathema. We have the political right who we oppose on liberal principles basis. We're anathema to them. We also love Muslims, so we're anathema from that perspective as well. And then from a Muslim perspective, we're supposed to be killed. So it's a great place to be.
I said it the other day that we are filth everywhere. We are Islamophobic filth in secular countries, and we are kafir filth in origin countries. And it's like, where are we supposed to go? But at least we got each other.
The world. and make it a better place where that's no longer the case, and we will do that.
I was asked this about secular values for a while ago, and you mentioned Majid Nawaz was trying to translate the Quran in a more secular manner, and that was around the time when he was starting to do this. That I started to think Pakistan was a democratic nation for a very long time because the British came. The British came to India and they brought with them their education system, and the school education system is still the same. The Quran schools, they didn't have that much power. The British didn't care much for it. So we can still see that a lot of modern values are from the Western countries. They are still left there. Although when you tell people what the real Islam says, they attack you because they refuse to believe that real Islam can be that evil. It has to be these made-up stories that have been passed down generations instead of what's really written in the Quran. But they don't even want to recognize that the values that are allowing them to treat their wives nice are not Islamic. They don't want to hear that because that has been sort of it's like your parents, they beat you and they tell you to submit to an order they give you, and then they hug you when you submit to that order, and that is how they make a Muslim. And every time when you have grown up, you have to kind of realize that that hug was a lie. Every time you're trying to break out of it, you sort of go through those beatings again because you have this muscle memory that doesn't let you go criticize Islam. So it is actually just torture, and all those good things that you find in Islam, they were never originally Islamic. They came from philosophy and democracy, and as Greek and Christian values, they were never Muslim. So when you leave as a boy, when you leave Islam, you have a completely different battle. When you leave as a girl, you have to fight your inner demons a lot more because we are shamed when we are growing up a lot. And we are beaten into believing that we are whores even if we raise our eyes up and look directly in someone else's face. So it's kind of it's the kind of torture you put yourself through all over again in order to free yourself. And once you have gotten my age, you see the media is telling you that the girl in hijab is modest. So that is Islamization of our nations right now, when they tell us that we don't belong anywhere, that we are the haters, and try to pretend like we don't exist. That's what has happened. That's the Islamization. It's not even sneaking up on us. It's all over. So we gotta start toughen up and.
So the issue there is, in my opinion, truth as well. So if women are choosing to wear the hijab, fine, they have the choice to wear it. But as long as we engage with the fact that what it represents in an Islamic context, it is modesty doctrine, which we have seen in Christianity, which we have seen in a variety of other contexts, where women are defined by their sexual worth and preserving that sexual worth. And as long as we're engaging with that honestly, those same women tomorrow will leave. A lot of ex-Muslim women are women that were those hijabi girls. They were convinced out of it over time. So our North Star has to be truth, that we talk about these things honestly. We advocate for the rights of these people. They should be able to wear whatever they want as equal citizens. But as long as we're talking about what this actually represents, over time we will shift these attitudes and pull these people out of these patriarchal norms that they exist. And one of the funnier things is the Islamic feminism meme that's been going around. And so we take this patriarch Muhammad and his patriarchal religion and we call it feminism. It has to have every right to. Everybody has the right to call anything whatever it is. But we need to be honest about what these things represent.
I just remember my dear friend Walid, he said about hijab. When a woman go with the hijab, she's telling outside that Quran is my authority. He get much critic from the Norwegian intellectuals. Lastly, I can say about why impossible to reform Islam, because of it's very easy. If we get rid of Muhammad and his history from the Islam is Muhammad, although, but let's say
he is the embarrassing facts of Islam.
Yeah, but to reform Islam, to make Islam a peaceful religion, you have to get rid of Muhammad first. The second one, you have to get rid of the Medina verses, huge part of the Quran, which is inhumane, intolerant, and not compatible with Western values. You have to get rid of. And the rest of the Quran is the all-knowing things, even before Islam and before Jesus. We know the good things, that you will not steal, for example, or be charitable. Even atheist people more charitable than the religious one. So what's left? Sugar-coated one lie. Why you want people continue to live with this lie? Don't do it. Tell the truth. This is what I mean about that, and I think we will get questions from audience too. So I want to talk a little bit about ex-Muslim. Earlier, ex-Muslims of North America had a campaign, #campaign, #awesome without Allah, and it was very successful, and they did one thing historical in the world. Can you, maybe many of you don't know about that, so can you talk about a little bit the Billboard and which reactions you get and how?
So we did a Billboard campaign in multiple cities in the US to make people aware of people leaving Islam. The Billboard was godless, fearless ex-Muslim with ex-Muslim faces, and the statistic that I had cited that 23.6% of US-raised Muslims have left the faith. But that wasn't the first iteration of the Billboard. You went through over a dozen different iterations, which Billboard companies rejected one after the other. We had put in bids at 50 different locations. Only 3 were approved. But still, it's the first time that anybody was able to do that publicly. And concurrently, we did the Awesome Without Allah campaign, where we encouraged people to come out and speak about their own lives. And we wanted it to be a positive, uplifting campaign on how wonderfully they are doing. Because one of the stigma that people have is that you will lose everything. And so people are not, like Jan was talking about, hurting her parents. People don't want to hurt their parents. But if you see other people that are prospering, are doing well, have a good relationship with their family, it empowers you to come out as well. And that's what we were aiming for. And we got responses from around the world, from India, from Germany, where a lot of people came out, made short videos about the fact that they were leaving. And that's, I think, the privilege that we have being in the West. Like, we can push boundaries that inspire others to do the same in locations where it's much harder than where we are.
Yeah, and if you write #awesome without Allah on Twitter, for example, then you will see how many brave ex-Muslims all around the world joined that. So, but it was a big billboard for 3 meters?
Something like that, 50, 60 feet.
Yeah,
but
you're
still imperial. We don't do metro around America.
Okay, but also I read it one thing is tragicomic. Not just funny, but it's tragic too. Like you said right now, that many companies rejected to hang up these billboards. Yeah. It is writing just only godless, fearless ex-Muslims. Many Christian people making big billboards with Jesus, walking on the water, or atheist people in the United States making against that. But when the ex-Muslims...
The #Awesome Without Allah was refused by everybody, so we couldn't put that on our billboards.
Yeah. And then I remember that one bakery one bakery 3 years ago, when ex-Muslims of North America had third anniversary year. They ordered one cake from a bakery, and very big bakery company, I think. Yeah. And they rejected to make cake to you. Why?
The cake said, "Happy third anniversary, ex-Muslims of North America." That's all it said. There was nothing blasphemous. There was no mention of Allah, but that was too much. And according to them, they couldn't ask their employees to make something so sacrilegious. And these are white Western peoples that aren't Muslim, because they had a few Muslim employees. They didn't even move to the stage where they asked Muslims. They preemptively censored.
And I haven't heard yet that Western liberals, special, I will say one more time, the leftist, not all of them, regressive leftists, never talking about ex-Muslim phobia, because this is ex-Muslim phobia. You don't tolerate the word ex-Muslim. And you know, many our friends or many Western people asking all the time, why you people calling yourself ex-Muslim? If you don't call yourself ex-Muslim, you will get support. You can say like humanist people with Muslim background.
Humanist people with Muslim background that reject Islam and think it's false. Yeah. It doesn't roll off the tongue.
Yeah. So I feel still that although we are very active, all ex-Muslims organization, but we need to explain why we are calling ourselves ex-Muslim. Because we were Muslim and we are not Muslim today, but why we are still saying we are ex-Muslim? Have you some comments?
So as Jamal was saying, that in 13 countries, we would be dead. It's legal to kill us. Many people are in jail across the Muslim world in Pakistan simply for making a Facebook post and on death row. There have been cases where people that are in jail, their lawyers have been murdered for having the temerity to defend them. And in that context, leaving Islam is a radical political act. And ex-Muslim isn't an identity. It's simply a statement of political defiance that you may want to kill us, you may want us to not exist, but we refuse to bow down.
And we want to normalize acceptance of apostasy and blasphemy. This is the reason I say, like you said, it's dangerous in many countries in the world, but even here, you know, it's not easy for us. We are afraid, and many people are afraid to come even to our seminars sometimes. Because I say I'm an ex-Muslim because I want to show to the public that it is something wrong, or not, no, it is dangerous to leave Islam. So I stand with to say ex-Muslim because I want to normalize, because I know there is a lot of ex-Muslims in the world, in Norway, many thousands. So they have to see that, oh, yeah, he say he's ex-Muslim, it's good. And we're getting many messages, like they're supporting us, they are ex-Muslim, they left Islam 20 years ago, he's living in Bergen, and he support us, but he cannot stand. But you are doing a good job, they say, like this. But that day, when we have no problem with the blasphemy and apostasy laws in Islam, I will stop calling myself ex-Muslim. Then we did our job. Because we are calling ex-Muslim today because this is very dangerous to be ex-Muslim in the world still.
I remember it was like 4 or 5 years ago when Bosch Foston was writing, I am not an ex-Muslim, I am an recovered Muslim. That was back then when ex-Muslims hadn't manifested itself as much as it has now. Because he was describing that he hasn't just left Islam, because he used to be Muslim, he used to be sick, he has, gotten better, he has recovered. But what I like about calling it ex-Muslims is that we know who each other are. We can find each other very easily, because I thought for years that I was alone. I didn't know how to find someone who was like me, who had left Islam. But now it's very easy. You just say you're an ex-Muslim, and the other ex-Muslims knows.
Not all over the world, but in the West.
But imagine the state of the world, that there's 1.5 billion Muslims, and a significant percentage of them have left, and all of them think that they're alone. Yeah. That was the state that we were in just a few short years ago.
There are a lot of ex-Muslims in Muslim countries. They
Yes,
just don't dare to.
Yes, no, I meant that standing out in public, but the other contacting us from all over the world, all over the world.
But it's like gay people, they are celebrated now in the Western countries, but the next thing is to help the ex-Muslims get out of the closet.
So next time, I advise to the liberals special that next time be sympathetic to ex-Muslims. They are with you. They are with the Western values. And they are humanists, real humanists. Okay. We are, yes. I hope that. And now I think we can have questions. No. Yes. Okay. No, she just wondered. She's she was. I started Ex-Muslims of Norway with Lily Bendy with us before. She just asked, "Do Sarah will have some speech?" I said, "No." She will have in 15th of November. She will come back to Norway. Now we have microphone. Christian is there. If you just. You don't need microphone. Okay. Yeah, you have to.
Very interesting seminar. One question: can you please tell us how is it to be an ex-Muslim in Norway today? Have you experienced any threats from the Muslim community? Are you in any dialogue with the mosques in order to reform Islam? Are you in some kind of witness protection program?
No, I take the risk. When I started, I knew that what I'm doing, and I know all the dangerous things can happen. So of course, I get alarm and camera around my house, and hide my address and telephone number. Nobody can find. We're getting messages from people who don't identify themselves, like fake accounts. Muslims are using more, the radical Muslims using more fake accounts than us, I believe. We're getting threats. We have informed PST, and especially in one case, one of us get real death threats with his house picture on the Google Maps. And that we will boil you in your blood, like this message, and then we contacted. But this is no problem. I know that we are in danger. We can be in danger everywhere. We never know, because we do some things is forbidden in Islam, and we know that out there is radical people like who believe 100% Muhammad. And 100% who want to follow him. We cannot stop them. But the other things, the most things make me sad. It's not the Muslims. Like dialogue with the mosques. Who say that we don't want a dialogue? We are an organization without any support. Only our members paying 250 kron in a year. And we are asking for seminars, partly support from Fritt Ord, and a lot of thanks to the Fritt Ord. Without them, we couldn't have these things. We are doing this voluntarily. But the problem is that people saying, why you don't have dialogue with the mosques? They can have dialogue with us. They have money. They're taking all these years money for what? Dialogue with the priest and sit together and just handshake? They can invite us, we go. Like one Muslim organization invited me. I have been there in one workshop, and it was wonderful with the hijabi woman. And I criticized them. I talk like I'm talking here, and it was very good. Why? I mean that this is a uniform. And I respect their using, but we have to have dialogue in this way. We have to talk openly. And I have no any money, 1 kron to the pay for one imam will come and sit here. I will use the people who are enlightened, people who are the intellectual. If they can invite us, we can go. EXMNA, one time, the Salafi movement in Oslo, one political party invited a debate with EXMNA and us. And I said yes. And the guy in EXMNA said no. What we can do. But we are doing, and it is coming. The theological debate is coming. First, we have to be accepted by the liberals, the leftists. You know, and I have to say, I'm leftist, okay? But not in Norway. I'm leftist in Turkey. So don't misunderstand me. I respect, we have a lot of real leftists who support us, our members, even like communist members. So I don't say everyone, but really I'm tired. I'm really tired about political correctness in Norway. Like, where is NRK? When me, Lili, Walid El-Kubaisi, and Sten Emberland, when we started organization, we had the first seminar. NRK was not there. State channel was not there. It was a historic day. Walid had written in 30 years. And he pushed it to be a political correct in the end. He tell me that. In the beginning, if you read the Walid El-Kubaisi, he's talking like us. But he get attacked. Somebody tried to kill him. One of the attackers died. A lot of things happened in Norway, but nobody know. Walid being betrayed by intellectuals in Norway. And when we sit, he had to call himself cultural Muslim all these years. But before, he was the Norwegian Salman Rushdie. Salman Rushdie number 2, they call it him. Imam call it him. But when we sit there and say, this is the ex-Muslims of Norway, it's enough. We left Islam, and this is our organization. We want to support all dissidents, and we want to normalize acceptance of criticizing Islam and acceptance of living Islam. So clear. We don't.
I'm saying, if we're talking about having a dialogue with mosques, the first thing to talk about is whether they support apostate rights, whether they support their own children leaving Islam. What are they doing to normalize it? The problem lies on their end, where their religion calls for our murder, where their people try to ostracize us, to shun us, to instigate violence against us. We're all happy to talk to them. But the ultimate issue is about freedom and about human rights that they need to address and fix.
Mm. And just to finish before Janet,
Yeah, sure.
And one thing you have to know that in any case, we never give up. In any case. And other thing is that today, our organization, Ex-Muslims of Norway, is the biggest organization, I believe, in Norway. Why? Because 55 countries following us. We can so see this in our Facebook insight, you know. And we have many followers, and we are writing English and Norwegian because of we want to reach more people. It's not all about Norway. This is a global problem. So even the mainstream media is not interesting with us, but I'm sure that if right now 10% of the Norway know about us, there is 1% of them know about any secular, so-called secular organization. That day, when we are invited to the state TV and in debate, then I believe all Norwegian people will support us, and they will see who we are and what we want and what really we say. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
No.
The threats are real and the hate mail is real, and I can tell when people are buying into the mainstream media propaganda or when they aren't, because when they are being when they buy into it, when they believe that they really are racist, then they don't say hi to me, my neighbors. They pretend like they didn't see me. When they start to not believe so much what's going on in the mainstream media, then they stop me and say hi and ask me how I'm doing. And when it comes to debating with imams, I wouldn't even talk to a compulsive liar, nevertheless a deliberate one, so no.
And I have to mention, just because of it is wrong, I just said one organization, Muslim organization invited. It's not that only, and Ahmadiyya Jamaat have invited us, and we have been in their mosque, and we have talked. It was 2 years ago, I think. It was very good, and even we had a little debate, like standing debate, about one verse is writing on the wall. So we are open, and we love to have dialogue with anyone. Anyone, and not only Muslims. I mean, is anyone. So stop. If like, just I have to say, because I'm burning right now. I'm burning. If Islamnet invites someone to dialogue, then the majority of intellectuals clapping. It's fantastic. Salafist and ex-Muslim are talking. But if one minister of one right-wing party invite us to hear how we can combat against forced marriage, how we can combat against negative social control, then everybody say these ex-Muslims are far right. We have to have dialogue with everyone.
No Nazis in our streets.
It is so comic.
No, but also, honestly, in order to debate with an imam, you have to know the
Not only
theology
debate,
dialogue. Have to know the theology by heart, like David Wood does. I don't think I want to spend my time on doing that when I want to focus more on what happened, because my experience is the female experience of a Muslim woman who is born in the Norwegian society and is raised in the Pakistani. So I rather focus on that. When I have proven by putting on a hidden microphone, going into a mosque, having a conversation with the imam, I have proven that they lie. They say one thing to us Muslims, they say another thing to Norwegians and non-Muslims. It's not talking honest with them. They're just trying to trick you. And my favorite is that, oh, no, you're misunderstanding because you can't speak Arabic.
Okay, and next question. We are now stuck in the one question. I'm sorry, but first time we have a good time for question. It's good. Yeah.
Hello.
Microphone there.
Microphone. I'm curious about more examples of support that you have received. You said Fritur, and also politicians invited you to debates. So I wonder if you have other examples of support, because you say
mean
that
financial or what kind of support?
any kind of listening
Yeah,
to you and giving you space, because I'm a bit confused about saying that the liberals, the leftists, should do better. Who does better? And is there any other groups that
yes,
could be
yes.
a model for?
Let me say,
yes?
Who are calling me and asking if something's in the debate? For example, hijabi woman with police with the hijab in UD. It's the case in the last week. Documents, the rights is contacting me and asking me what you think, what ex-Muslims of Norway is saying about that and this and that. Why don't call the classic company? Why? I don't know who is classic company even. I just know somebody writes it there against us, very bad article. I didn't need to answer it. This is the problem. Problem is the mainstream media is owned by liberals. Are you agree with me? Or is it far right? Far right owning mainstream media? Do you think that? No. Yeah. Enerco. Who are there? Who are they? They are giving place and the best sending time to a hijabi girl will show me which party she will vote it. What is that? And they are sending documentary about how to be a Muslim. You know, we have one good director, movie director. Her name is Dia Khan. How many films she made it? 4. The first one is about honor culture. It is in the NRK. The second one is jihadi. Jihadi people talking about why they became a jihadist. It is in NRK. The third one is not there. The fourth one about far right, it is in NRK. What's the third one? Which movie is that? This is ex-Muslims. This is it's a scum. This is really how? In one country, they're giving Nobel Peace Prize. And they, from their own, the director making movie about ex-Muslims, specific. Islam's non-believers, ex-Muslims. And this movie is not in Norway. It is in ITV. She asked money or support to the NRK, but she didn't get support. She have to ask the ITV in England, have to get support for this movie. You know, a lot of examples there. So we have a liberal problem. We have, I don't know, just because, the other examples. In 20, 30 years, we have many books, wonderful books. If you read the books, you will left Islam. 30 years old. Just because these writers had a different political ideas than the leftists, they betrayed them. They never showed these books. I can name it. Understanding Muslims, for example. Ben Muhammad, Ali Sina. And after that, now we have to write the things again and again and again. We are wasting our time. One book could be enough. But just because they don't show this, they don't want to have the debate about these books. So now the new ex-Muslims, we are writing almost the same thing. It is just wasting time. And who is responsible? It's the regressive left, not the Islamists.
So part of the reason I would say is there's somewhat of a disengagement with what it means to be a Muslim. Like there's a homogenous idea that people from Pakistan, people from Turkey, people from Saudi Arabia are all the same. They all believe the same things. So in order to support them, we must support their superstitions as well. And that's a misconception. It's not coming necessarily from a place of malice. And therefore, they support the most authentic, which tends to be the most conservative version of Islam. Instead of, these are all people that have a variety of ideas, like other Norwegian people have a variety of ideas. There are people that are liberal from Saudi Arabia. There are people that are conservative. And to show that variety and to support all of those, and to also have your own opinion on these things. Certain ideas are bad. It's okay to talk about that. And so they're often trapped in that quest for what is the right Muslim, what is the right representation of these people, instead of viewing them as individuals. And because of that, this turned into this right-left rift that shouldn't really exist, because our values tend to be liberal, human rights types of values that the left generally should support. But due to the fact that they're pulling it in one direction, the right is pulling it in the opposite direction, they're coming at it from a xenophobic perspective that these guys are not from our culture and don't belong here, and they don't deserve the same dignities. So we are sort of getting squished in the middle of these larger political forces that have really nothing to do with us.
This is the most right thing, Absolutely right. I don't like to talk about left and right, but they're pushing me. Because this is not my case. I want to talk about Islam. I want to give information and doubts. Like young people can have doubts. When I say something, they can say. Like when I was young, when I first time saw one book, written by Ilhan Arsel, Woman and Sharia. My brother come with this book home, and when I opened, coincidence, and I saw they're writing that Muhammad says women are like a dog or like this something thing. I just whoosh, and I said, how you can bring this book to home, to my brother. But something's happened there. Did he lying? Because he said that this hadith from this book. Or it is true. I didn't do nothing then. But later again, I met with some critic because I was an Islamist. When you put doubt inside the brain, one day it will be too many, and then it will force you to go to the source and look yourself. Is it true or not? And this happens, So I want to talk about these things, not the right, not the left, but in any case.
Ultimately, I think as we become more powerful, as ex-Muslims become more empowered everywhere, they'll be forced. So within the U.S., we've actually gotten quite positive coverage. We've been covered by the New York Times, by The Economist, by BBC. And one of the reasons is we are doing a lot of things and we are helping people. And so when there's any media attention, we have a litany of cases that we can throw at them about what's going on. One of the cases was, I mentioned in my talk that there's a Somali kid, 19-year-old, that was kidnapped, taken to Kenya, and he was gay and an ex-Muslim, and he was going to be put in a conversion camp. So we were able to rescue him, we brought him back, and then we produced a documentary on our own about his experience. And you can view that on our YouTube channel if you look at Muslims in North America. But a BBC reporter saw that documentary and then contacted us that he wanted to cover this story. So a lot of it is that we will have to be bigger and be more powerful and highlight these stories to a point where they become very hard to ignore.
And the other things I have to just clear that, yes, he's right. But, we all ex-Muslims organization are, in the main point, we are everything. But we have different styles. Like I'm following ex-Muslims of North America. It's a very good page, fantastic. And they are sharing many religions critique, not only Islam, everything.
And truth.
Truth. But like we focus it because of Norway. When we started, we said we are criticizing other religions too. We have a lot of things, but not so much as they have. So we say no. Now, until we do some awakeness, we have to focus only to Islam. And then we get critic. They say, why you are not nuance? Nuance in English, I don't know. Nuance? Yeah. You have to have nuance. You have to show positive sides of the what Muslims are doing. But my friend, what Muslims are doing is not Muhammad. I'm talking about what Muhammad doing. Okay? Islam is Muhammad. Islam is not what Muslims are doing. This is a different thing. And other thing that I never saw any atheist page who were Christian before and now atheist. I mean Western atheist page showing some positive thing about Christianity. I never saw. Why you ask me to? I know there are a lot of beautiful people who calling themselves Muslim and living very good life, and they have better morality and the scriptures, and they are charitable. I know one Muslim man helping one old woman on the street. This thing is not I'm talking about. We are talking about Islam, which have forbidden any critic in 1,400 years. We can prove with the history, nothing more.
It goes back to the same thing, conflating Islam and Muslims. When you conflate them, criticism of Islam becomes criticism of Muslims. So it's hard for them to then understand that we're not attacking people, we're attacking ideas. A lot of that pushback comes from that misunderstanding.
I think the biggest problem right now with the support that we are not getting is in the way of prosecution of people who support us. They are called racist. Everyone who dives into the Quran and opens it up for people to read and to show people how it's used against Norwegian rights or Western rights and Western values are called racist. So it's not like it's just money or invitation or a hug that is missing there. It's moral that is missing there, and that is the biggest disappointment of those who actually freed themselves from the church and the priests, and are now making sure that we don't get our time to have the freedom of speech, the freedom of being direct, the freedom of actually learning from our mistakes. As Norwegians, we are treated as outsiders, and any insiders who try to take us in their homes and in their hearts are called racists. So it's like if you don't accept the new Norway and the multicultural, the way the Western world is saying it, the way they want us to just eat it in the media, like they invite Lars Gule, like he's an Islam expert. He is not. Why don't they invite Hege Storhaug? Why don't they try to create a balance? No, they want to just rush one-sided stories on everyone. If you disagree, you're a racist. That's dictatorship, and that is such a lack of support for everyone, not just ex-Muslims.
Okay. We will be quick. I have to say to myself, I have to talk little. Okay. Halvor?
Thank you. Permit me to be a bit dissident inside the dissident movement. Muhammad, you talked about telling the truth. And I become a bit skeptical when you are talking about telling the truth, because the truth has turned out through history that the truth is a lot of things. And I've spent big parts of my life in communist countries where they were very much telling the truth, and where they were atheist. They were atheist countries, sure, telling the truth. Enlightenment, you know, they pretend to be the best parts of the European Enlightenment, and they ended up in communism. So I will say that what is important is not to tell the truth, but what is important, like Cemal said now, to advocate doubt, tvil, the doubt, because that is really the core of Western civilization, to doubt everything. And that's really the fundament of Western progress, that doubt became legal in the West. Not telling the truth, but to doubt everything and say that I don't believe what you say, I doubt it, I have my own thesis. So I think the best approach to criticizing Islam will be to put Islam up against Western values and say that if you want to live in the West, you have to embrace Western values, because if you don't embrace Western values, you will turn us, the Western world, back into the Muslim world, back into the medieval world. And therefore, I think it's extremely important to demand that all parts of the Quran, all parts of the Muslim faith advocating violence must be eliminated, must be taken away. And I think that is the strongest stand we can make against Islam, to say that all kind of advocacy for violence, either it is against women, it's against homosexuals, it's against infidels, against those who leave the belief, everything of that must be eliminated in Islam if Islam shall be regarded as a religion on par of Buddhism, Christianity, humanism, everything. All kind of advocacy for violence must be taken away.
So
thank you.
I would say most Muslims aren't interested in that at all. They don't care. And also, you're talking about the Western world. Most Muslims don't live in the Western world. The problem over here is an echo of the actual problem, which is happening, where Muslims are suffering due to Islam. And we need to engage those. If the problem in the West didn't exist, if every Muslim that lives in the West did not live in the West, the people that are in Pakistan and Saudi Arabia and Iraq, Iran, all of them would still be suffering. This is a global problem and we need to solve it. I'm not sure about the distinction you're drawing between between truth and doubt. I agree entirely with your point about doubt being the bedrock of everything. But in order to have doubt, you need to engage them with what they believe to the truth to be.
And I think I agree with you, and I think maybe, however, you misunderstand, because I said much more than him. Telling the truth is important. The truth meaning, like you translated Ibn Ishaq to Norwegian. You are telling the truth of a source of Islam. I mean, telling, one of the biggest problem in the Islamic world is denying the truth. What is the truth? Truth is sources of Islam. Because how we know what is Islam? We know because of what Quran, Hadith books, and the Sirat. And when we tell these things in the public, even they denying. So, and many people don't know even. Many people even don't know that Aisha was 9 years old when Muhammad had sex with her. Can you believe that? Many Muslims don't know. I didn't know even when I was young. I mean, we have to tell the truth so they can have doubt inside. They can doubt to me, say, do I say the truth? Now I saying that Muhammad did that. I said 80 years old woman, Muhammad split it to two with 2 camel. And then when I say this, and if young Muslim now watching and hearing that, he say, look at this kuffar. He's lying about my prophet. But it will sit there. One day he will force it to go and check it, like I did. This is what I mean. We have to tell the truth. And I agree with you, but the other side, totally agree. When you say that we have to say to them that Quran, Islam have to be compatible with the Western values. And then you will hear from a lot of Muslims, but they are. They are compatible. Look at that. This is the most peaceful religion in the world. So this is very big context, Yeah, and
I
last question. Oh, yeah, you. Yeah.
I completely agree with you on we should value the fact of the doubt. Telling the truth my truth can be someone else's lie. Of course, I understand that. And what you just said, if we had never backed away from that in our countries, in European countries, ex-Muslims wouldn't be suffering. If we had never backed out from those basic democratic values, we would still not have any trouble. There wouldn't be any fatwas against authors. There wouldn't be anyone being forced marriage. The politicians would have treated everyone equally. I think I see people talk very often about the weakness in democracy. I don't think democracy actually really has any weaknesses as long as we stay true to those values that build a democratic world. But we just let them all go because the politicians, they get greedy, and that is how democracy turns into dictatorship when politicians start to take care of what they want instead of passing down something that was good. So if we could just today start to dictate again the value of doubt instead of just bending our knees to Islam, who says doubt is punishable by death because it leads to apostasy, then we could start to go back to what we used to have, the freedom of speech. But I would like to applaud you for what you said, but still it's we are so far away from that, and I hope we can get back there. That's basically why we are fighting, so everyone can go back to the freedom of doubt.
So, sorry. I slightly disagree with you over there in the sense that even if, as I was saying, even if there are no Muslims in the West, or every Muslim in the West completely agrees with however you define Norwegian values or liberal values, and we don't have any issue there. If a Salman Rushdie pops up and is writing a book, there will be Muslims in other parts of the world that will be offended, that will issue fatwas, that will come after him. The only way you can actually change that is to hermetically seal your borders, move away from the rest of the world, and be alone, which is not a viable thing in the modern world. What we have to do is we have to change the hearts and minds of everybody around the world. It's a difficult task. We're talking about 1.5 billion people, but we have done it before. It happened in the West. There's no reason that it can't happen over there as well.
I agree, totally.
I just meant that we should defend the right to doubt.
Last question, short one, please. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. I'm wondering about how many percentages of the Muslim world you think would actually have managed to start believing in this reformed Islam, like the one that Nawaz or Tawhidi are talking about, which shows it's a very nice idea. I mean, but would it be 5%? Would it be 50%? How many of the believing Muslims would actually?
Can I just? Right now, our politicians, they are investing a lot of money in radical Islam. They are giving a lot of money to mosques and Muslim organizations that are radicalizing people. So you have to almost double that amount of money into investing in another kind of faith or belief that you start to push people to go to. So I don't think it's going to happen. And our politicians are calling this freedom of religion while they are pushing people into radicalization rather than being free.
So
I think you agree.
I would say that it's negligible. I've never run across somebody that listened to Majid Nawaz and that believed in beating women and believed in murdering infidels and heard Majid and said that, okay, maybe secular humanism works. Regardless of what the Quran said, I'll ignore the Quran. I've never seen that. It may happen in rare instances, but the argument isn't connected to what they actually believe. And when you're trying to convince somebody, you need to come down to their level, speak to them in the terms that they recognize, the framework of reality that they're inhabiting, and pull them to where you are. If that bridge doesn't exist, it's very hard to convince anybody.
I totally agree with him. So I said you can talk. You know, I like Imam Tawhidi in many things. I like Majid Nawaz in many things. And I like the Canadian, Pakistani. No. She is the.
Rahil Raza.
No, the man, the good guy, Indian guy. Tariq Fatah, yes, Tariq Fatah. I like him much, many things. But you know, a lot of time I'm thinking, do they really honest? Because it look like they're apostates. Why they say they are Muslim? So they cannot convince me even. So they cannot convince any Muslim, if you ask me. Because they are telling good things, but in the end, we Muslim. Islam is this and Islam. This is their interpretation. Who cares? Muslims not caring. They are don't.
They care about the book.
Yeah, they care about the book, which is any doubts in it. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, please.
To add one thing, like you mentioned Tariq Fatah, you mentioned Majid Nawaz, you mentioned Imam Tawhidi. These are all very different people. Majid Nawaz, I agree with entirely regarding his principles, regarding human rights, liberal rights. Imam Tawhidi, on the other hand, is more of a Shia radical. I would, comparing with far-right Islamists rather than a liberal. He doesn't talk about human rights. He doesn't talk about the rights of Muslims. He talks about only the horrible parts of it. From my perspective, every Muslim is a human being that has the same rights and liberties that we do. And we should treat them with the same dignity. A while ago, he posted something about the fact that if a terrorist attack happens, we shouldn't wait for due process. We should immediately hang them on cranes in the middle of Australia. That is the words of an Islamist. That is not the words of a liberal person that believes in the rule of law.
And thank you very much. And I just want to remind you that you are welcome to be member of ex-Muslims of Norway. You don't need to convert to Islam and apostate to be, because we need any sports. It is, and we have many T-shirts there and books. You can buy it if you want to support us, or just be a member. Support us. We need your support. Thank you very much. And I have a gift to Muhammad, but where is the? There is that. Yes, it has been like a tradition to give Yuval Noah Harari to our guest, even if they read it, no problem. Muhammad, this book, like I say every time, it have to be in the schools, in every school. If you read that, then you will understand every religion is bullshit.
You'll understand a lot of other things too.
And this is all his books. Sapiens is one of the best, I think. And if you have it, you can change it. I have recipe there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.